That is creepy how it knows. Just knows we're there.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Let me take a swig of water here real quick. Oh. All right. My name is Tony Toon. I am, of course, the Walrus.
And welcome back. My name is Leanne Palmer, and I am your fairy.
Woo.
Yee.
All right. So the economy.
That's the topic of discussion today. And the reason I wanted to talk about this is because while I am no expert on economics,
Neither am I.
there are some things that I have noticed that need to be taken note of and that everybody should be aware of and be prepared for.
Mm-hmm.
First off, we had the floods in Nebraska.
Mm-hmm.
What a lot of people don't understand or didn't at the time is that the floods in Nebraska happened during calving season,
Mm-hmm.
which means a lot of
Dead cows.
dead baby cows because they were calving. These pregnant mothers were giving birth in these floodwaters, and they were ice cold floodwaters, and there were ice bridges and ice dams and all of this going through the fields at the time, and there was no warning that it was going to happen. So the farmers had no way to get their cattle to safety. It was get out and get yourself to safety.
Yeah.
And the cattle had to come second. So there's a huge loss in the cattle market right now.
Mm-hmm.
Which also leads to a loss in the same flood in Nebraska, as well as flooding in Kansas and Indiana and Missouri, and all of your farming states have yet to plant a lot of the corn.
Yeah. Although I did see the other day that Indiana's doing a lot better. We're at 50% now.
Okay.
So that's not great, but it's a lot better.
Right, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to get the yield out of that corn that we would normally get.
Well, I mean, you're going to presumably get half.
Well, okay, so this is what I was watching a video last night regarding this. And because of the conditions of the field, we may have planted 50% of our fields, but that 50% is going to give us a lower yield than it would in a normal year because the fields are soggy.
That bat's had so much damage.
Right.
Yeah.
Which means there's not, the nutrients aren't there and the conditions aren't there for the crops to give us, the crops that have been planted, to give us the yield that we would normally get from them.
Makes sense.
So you've got a shortage of corn, which is basically in everything.
Mm-hmm.
We use it for feed, we use it for seed, we use it for cereals.
Well, I mean, not just corn. I mean, everything.
Well, the grain. I'm speaking specifically of corn.
Yeah.
It's used in ethanol. It's used just as corn for food. And that's not going to be there.
Yeah.
The cattle are not going to be there. They might be there this year because what the video I was watching last night, and I'll have to look that up, and I will reference it in a later at a later point during this discussion. Was saying is that the cattle markets are being flooded with the cattle that survived so that they can meet the futures and the contracts that they promised, which then leads to a cattle shortage, maybe not this year, or a beef shortage this year, but a beef shortage in
next year,
2020 and 2021.
Yeah, because they just won't have as much to move to meat because, yeah.
Right. Because they're doing that this year to meet their contracts. Which to me says be prepared for higher food prices. I'm not saying apocalyptic, oh my gosh, get ready, there's going to be no food.
The end times. Yeah.
Right. I am saying your food prices are going to go up. And I don't think most Americans are prepared for that.
No,
Gas prices are going to go up because of the ethanol and the lack of the corn to make the ethanol.
Yeah.
And I don't think most Americans are prepared for that.
No, that's a good point, and that is something I have thought about. Not as much as you, obviously, but it does. And we were talking about this last video. It does seem like with these floods and all that stuff, we're gonna have the food and prices, and we've had a bull market for a while now.
A while.
I mean, a very long time. There's going to be a correction. When? I don't know. I'm not an expert. But a lot of the things that Trump brought up in the 2016 election, he used them to get elected, but he's still, right about, workforce participation. Yeah, unemployment is down, and workforce participation is up. Quite a bit actually, but it's still, I think, only about in the mid 60s. The type of jobs we're getting tend to be, I don't want to say, because we have added a lot of manufacturing jobs, especially in the last couple of years.
They're very physically intensive.
Yeah, they're blue collar jobs.
And there's nothing wrong with blue-collar jobs, and there's nothing wrong with physical-intensive or labor-intensive jobs, because those tend to pay well.
Yeah.
But there are people like myself, and there are people like our teenagers who can't do that yet.
Yeah. Well, not only that, but, we've added a lot of manufacturing jobs, but then we've also added a lot of jobs that are low income, and unfortunately, because of the workforce participation rate, those are being filled by a lot of middle-aged people.
Yeah.
Instead of I'll just use myself as an example. I'm a college graduate, and this goes into a lot of different issues, but I work for Grubhub right now. I worked for Rural King for a little bit. Before that, I worked for the post office for Christmas, helped there for a little while. I worked for security there at the casino, and these are, except for the post office, I got paid fairly well at the post office, but for all those jobs don't require a college degree. All those jobs really didn't take into account my college degree, and really didn't use the skills that I have learned to their full potential. I mean, really, it was, I hate to sound arrogant, but it's kind of a waste.
No, and I get what you're saying. It is, why go to college and get a degree if you're not going to use the degree?
Well, I mean, not only for me, but for them.
Right. There's a waste of money. There's a waste of potential. There's a waste. I get what you're saying.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm 33 years old. I'm a Navy veteran. I've worked multiple jobs, and I have a college degree, and yet I was filling a position at Rural King. I mean, why did I have that job? Why didn't
Why didn't an 18-year-old fresh out of college looking,
fresh out of high school get that job?
Or fresh out of high school, sorry. That's what I meant. Fresh out of high school, get that job to act as a first job, to build on, to work into better employment. And that's what those jobs are meant for.
Yeah. And, but then on the other hand, in a lot of ways, that was the type of jobs they're offering me.
Right.
Because, I go to these white collar jobs, and like I said, I have a journalism degree, and I've tried to get a job in some journalism places, and I don't know if I'm blacklisted, but I think I'm blacklisted. And if you listen to these conversations, maybe you know why. Even though I don't think I'm an extremist at all.
Maybe a little bit.
Maybe a little bit. Look, it's not my fault that Trump is the emperor of mankind and is the savior of the republic.
Yeah, but you don't say that during a job interview.
Hey. Gotta speak truth to power. But no, it doesn't have anything to do with that. It has things with things that happened at school. I told some people off and made projects that have what I would consider a logical bent, but they would consider an extreme bent, especially at the time. Ironically, about economics.
Right.
Where I talked about NAFTA and, how the good and the bad of NAFTA and, what it did to Mexican farmers. And I talked about the earnings gap and as opposed to a wage gap. Yeah, they didn't like it. They did not like it at all.
And I agree with your statement on it is an earnings gap, not a wage gap.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and I defended Brexit too. Ooh, boy, that pissed them off.
Go, Brex.
Take it down. Again, if I was president, I would have burnt Brussels down to the ground by now, but...
I mean, when you hear about some of the things that the European Union is trying to do with the member countries...
Yeah, it's not good.
It's not good.
No.
But talking about the U.S. economy...
Yeah.
You were talking about some of the jobs that you had. I'm also a college graduate. I have my degree in religious studies. I have done a lot of jobs since I graduated college. My last job is what would be considered a fairly decent white-collar job. I was working in the accounting department for one of our local 4-star hotels in downtown Indianapolis.
Mm-hmm.
In the accounting department, my job was the income auditor, so I had to balance all of the receipts with the cash that was taken in. And it's not that hard. But I was, at one point, expected to... Okay, so we were going through a systems change, a systems conversion. So they were converting from one property management system, which handles the reservations and the income and everything like that, to another property management system. Yeah. And it was an absolute nightmare.
Yeah.
And the week we did that, I did my normal Sunday through Thursday shift.
Mm-hmm.
I put in 50 hours in 5 days and got a call on Friday from my boss saying I had to be in to do the income audit because nobody else knew how to do it. I had already worked my normal shift.
Mm-hmm.
I'd already put in 50 hours. Was it 24 of those were in a 36-hour period?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I actually at one point spent the night at the hotel.
Yeah.
And I checked in. I clocked in at 7 o'clock. I got to the hotel at 6:30 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
Clocked in at 7 o'clock in the morning. Clocked out at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Took some time to go across to the mall and explore and get out of the hotel and get some fresh air and some exercise. Came back, got food, went to bed, was up at 2:30 in the morning, and clocked back in at 3 in the morning, and clocked out at 3:30 that afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
Did 24 hours on the clock in under 36. It was crazy. And my boss was telling me I had to be at work on Friday.
Mm-hmm.
forced overtime.
And with all your medical issues, you just can't do it.
And I told him no. I said, there's no way. I can't. I had woke up that morning. I couldn't stand up straight. I was nauseous. I was sick to my stomach. I was fighting a migraine. And because I'd already pushed myself too far, over the course of the week.
Because even back then, you had a lot of issues.
Right. But what got me is that a couple of weeks later, I came in. I had gone to see the doctor. And I came in with a doctor's note that said I was not allowed to lift more than 5 pounds. And it came to a point, again, where I was told I had to be in on Friday.
Mm-hmm.
On my normal day off, I was told I had to be in on my normal day off. And when I came in, there was a note on my desk that said, don't do the audit. This is what I need you to do. And what they wanted me to do was take all of the income audit packets out of the file drawers for the last 3 months, which is normal, put them into boxes, into storage boxes, and then take the storage boxes up to the 3rd floor. Now, each of these packets themselves have about a half a ream of paper in them.
Yeah.
Plus the receipts. Plus, signed forms that you, consent forms and notification forms that the guests have to sign, the pet responsibility form and that's, all this other stuff. So, each packet probably weighed 3 to 5 pounds in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get roughly about 10 of those packets into a box. And I'm being told that this is what he wants me to do. And I told him, I remember looking at him and I said, you realize that there's a note on file that I just gave you a week ago that says I'm not allowed to lift more than 5 pounds. And he says, well, you just have to move the packets. And the packets aren't that heavy. Obviously, he wasn't, he hadn't done the job that he was asking me to do.
Yeah.
Which is a big thing.
Yeah.
And that's when I said no. I did my thing. I did what I had to do that day. I came home. I was in so much pain. I had to take my prescription pain meds.
Mm-hmm.
And I slept for 2 days. Just to try and deal with what had happened over the previous week. And I called in sick as part of the conversion.
Mm-hmm.
The phone systems went down. So I call in sick one day, and I can't get through, and I can't get through, and I can't get through, and I can't leave a voice message because the phone systems are down. I finally get through, and the phone systems come up, and they're like, well, we can't prove that you tried to call. And there's no email, because I'm not allowed to email, which is actually an assigned thing. One of the things that they made me sign is that I had to call. And I'm not allowed to leave a voice message, which is also in the paperwork that they made me sign. And so I went to the doctor and talked to the doctor and told the doctor what was going on and, hey, can I get this FMLA paperwork filled out until we figure out exactly what's going on, because this is what my employer is doing to me. And they're like, absolutely, not a problem. So I called back and got through this time to HR. And when I went down the next day, spending $50 for a cab ride from my apartment to the hotel, ended up having to sign a no-call, no-show paper for the day before, because I didn't call, and they didn't have a record of my calling because the phone systems were down. Now, the point in all of this, when it comes to job availability and job participation. There are reasons a lot of people don't participate in the workplace.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a long way of getting around it, but that is my own personal experience.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I wanted to share, was my personal experience. And this is a 4-star hotel that owns 60 plus hotels and resorts across the country. That's treating their local employees like this.
Yeah.
Which adds to the lack of participation, because people don't want to be treated that way.
Oh, yeah. No, I completely understand that. I mean, I've been treated poorly as well in a lot of places.
Now, I should say, at the time that this happened, I'd been with the company for 11 years.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I worked at Walmart there for a while when I dropped out of college the first time. And I just walked off that job because that was ridiculous. I forget exactly how it went down when the manager started yelling at me, and I said, "You need to calm down or I'm leaving." I was like, "Well, you need to..." They wanted me to... what exactly did he want me to do? I can't remember. He was pissed because I didn't show up 15 minutes early. I showed up on time. I showed up about 10 minutes early, and I forget exactly what he was yelling at me about, but he wanted me to move something or whatever, and he was sitting there yelling at me, and basically told him to fuck off. I told him to come back when he can talk rationally. But yeah, I basically walked off that job because I wasn't going to put up with that. But
back to the economy.
Yeah.
There's a reason why job participation and employment and participation is so low. And there's a reason why the poverty level is so high. And one of the things that we really need to start looking at in the future, especially in the next couple of years, is where food prices are going and where gas prices are going. And when food prices are going to go up anyway, as we said, because of the floods.
Yeah.
Now, gas prices go up because we don't have the corn to make the ethanol, which then causes food prices to go up even more because it costs more to transport them around the country. And like I said, I'm not advocating, I'm not saying, hey, it's the end times, end of the world, but people really should be prepared for what's coming.
Yeah. I mean, we're not saying how much it is going to increase anyway. I mean, I don't know how much it's going to increase. I mean, it might increase just a couple cents. It might increase a couple bucks. Who knows? But, you know, when you're talking about a fixed income, you know, that could make or break you.
Yeah.
I guess the next big thing we need to talk about is the tariffs.
Oh, right. Which didn't happen.
Well, yeah.
Everybody freaked out about the tariffs, and then they didn't happen. However, I agree with the idea of what Trump was doing with the tariffs.
He was using it as a negotiation tool. And it does seem like most of what he got was already in the works, but he was forcing the issue. That's what a lot of people don't understand. I mean, it's the same deal with China. Like, we have a deal written with China right now.
Right.
China has walked away, won't sign it. So Trump just keeps putting more tariffs on him until... Because originally he put tariffs on, then he kind of backed off, relieved some tariffs here and there, you know, as a show of good faith during the negotiations. And then we have a deal written up, and I don't know the details of the deal. I need to sit down and read it one day, but that's a lot of work, and I'm stupid. But That's what a lot of people don't realize. And China walked away from the deal, so Trump just put tariffs back on, and he's putting more tariffs on. I mean, he got the EU to capitulate real quick. That's what a lot of people. The EU is a paper tiger. Like, if you're in Britain, dude, stop being a bunch of wusses and just leave. Like, you're gonna be fine. The EU, you don't need it. But yeah, I mean that's what he was doing. He was using it as a negotiation tactic, and it does look like Mexico's going to move those 6,000 troops to the Guatemalan border, which is honestly because most of the illegal immigration isn't coming from Mexico anymore.
It's coming through Mexico.
It's coming through Mexico. And that goes into NAFTA. When NAFTA first happened, it put a lot of farmers in Mexico out of work because they couldn't compete with American farmers because American food was subsidized. So Mexican market got flooded with American food. Mexican farmers couldn't compete. They lost their jobs. They either moved to the Madrises up north, the new factories, or they fled across the border. But that was more of a 90s issue. But yeah. But it would be kind of funny, and we've talked about this, if Trump gets his wall, but it's on the Mexican border.
Right. Well, and to be perfectly honest with you, I believe that's where the wall should be.
Yeah.
I mean, and we've talked about that because it's a solid piece of land. It's 150 miles of land that needs to be protected versus 3,000 miles that includes
rivers,
the Rio Grande, and a floodplain.
Yeah.
That includes Louisiana and the floodplain and the Mississippi Delta. And
we do need a wall in Arizona.
I'm not saying that there aren't areas that don't need walls where we can't put walls.
Yeah.
But it's much easier to protect 150 miles of border between Mexico and Guatemala to keep immigrants from flowing through Mexico into the U.S. than it is to protect 3,000 miles of border that includes rivers and floodplains on the U.S.-Mexico border.
Yeah. And that goes in the Mexican tariffs. I mean, the media was trying. I mean, that was a huge victory for Trump, and they tried to downplay it. And it was just like he won. And I'm not saying it's going to happen, but some people have talked about it. You know, if there was a wall built on that border, and the Mexicans pay for it, he's going to win even bigger in 2020.
I honestly think you're right. I think it would be funny if the Trump wall ends up being built in Mexico by Mexico.
Yeah.
Because it would have the same effect as a wall on the U.S. border. It would be cheaper, and it's easier to protect.
Oh, man, can you imagine him? Biden or whoever trying to challenge him on the debates, and if he gets that done, oh, my God, he will wreck them. Oh my God, it would be a massacre.
And this is one of the things I think that where I respect the office of the presidency, even if I don't necessarily agree with the man and all of his policies.
Yeah.
I agree on the immigration thing.
Yeah.
I agree that there is a humanitarian emergency on the border.
Yeah, there is.
I agree that
it's not made up.
No. And I agree that we need to do something about that.
And it's been going on for decades. It's not that goes into a lot of things, but that
right.
Talking about one of the reasons why you like Trump and I don't, kind of I can't help but think of use this illegal immigration issue. That's one of the reasons why I like Trump, because he's actually trying to do something about it. He's actually trying to solve the problem. People call him racist and misogynistic. This problem has existed for decades. We know there's human trafficking. We know there's rapists. We know there's drug problems. We know... How do I want to word this? They dare accuse us of being fascist and being racist, when for decades they did not care about human trafficking. They did not care about the rape issue. They did not care about the coyotes. They did not care about brain drain. They did not care about the what illegal immigration does to the labor market.
The labor market in our economy.
Okay, it's definitively okay. If you don't believe in if you're a socialist and you don't believe in economics, whatever, I can't convince you. When you increase the amount of cheap labor, it's going to drive prices down. Okay, you don't need any study to prove that, even though there is a Harvard study to prove it. Why you need a Harvard study to prove basic economics, I don't know. But then they sit there and they say that Trump is dividing the country and we're dividing the country, when for decades they ignored us, and any time we brought it up, we were called racist. And then they have the audacity to sit there and say that we're racist. No. You're dividing the country. But, rant over.
Rant over. And I think this is one of the things where I actually agree with Trump.
Yeah.
And agree with you, is the immigration issue. And there is an immigration issue, and there is an immigration problem.
Yeah.
And I am not saying stop all immigration.
No.
Because
no one is, except the most
right.
except the most extreme people.
Legal immigration, I have no problem with.
Mm-hmm.
People seeking political asylum the correct way, I have no problem with.
Yeah, and go ahead.
It's when we have illegal immigrants, and yes, I said illegal immigrants, not undocumented migrants, because they are illegal. They broke the law when they crossed the border without permission. In other countries, in the Middle East, in Asia, and parts of Europe, that is a death sentence.
Yeah.
Period. You cross over illegally without proper documentation, you die. And what I have been seeing over the last few decades, because as we have said before, I'm a little bit older, as I have grown up, as I grew up, and over the past few decades, I am seeing what I would call a passive invasion through illegal immigration. And we need to do something about that. And if that means putting tariffs on Mexico for them to do something about the illegal immigration on their southern border to stop the flow through Mexico into the U.S., by all means, that's what it takes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as far as the passive invasion goes, I mean, and I hate to point it out because a lot of these other extreme groups on the other side that want to shut off all immigration point this out, but, you got to point out the extremists on the other side. There's La Raza, which is an extremist group. They try to say they're not anymore, but it was on their website for years that they were encouraging illegal immigration because they basically wanted to do the reverse of what happened in the 1800s, where Texas and the Southwest became so full of Americans it became American territory. They want to do a reverse. Yeah, I mean, you can sit there and say whatever and accuse people being stupid and racist, whatever, but that's what they said they were going to try to do. So, I mean, you can't deny that. I had another really important point I wanted to make, but I forgot it. Oh well.
That comes with age.
I'm only 33. No.
You're still getting old. You're not as old as I am, but you're still getting old.
I am old. I'm old in the soul. I'm old and beaten and broken. Anyone who's spent time in the military, once you leave, you're old. It just happens. No, I mean the problem has existed for decades, and
and I
God
think
dang.
right
what's
now,
the point I wanted to make? It was really good.
And I agree with you. The problem has existed for decades, and I think Trump pulling out the tariffs to force the issue, to force something to happen, was not necessarily a bad thing.
And that's the reason why I like Trump. He forces the issue, and yeah, he's crude, he's crass, and I'll say that all day. But damn it, he's forcing the issues, and they needed to be forced. It's just my opinion, and it's ugly, and makes people cry, but I don't care. Time to be an adult, I guess.
No.
Yeah.
I don't want to be an adult. Adulting is hard.
It is hard. But no, yeah. Man, there was something I wanted to say.
You'll remember it when we're doing the next recording. And it'll come up.
Yeah. Oh, well. That's all I got.
That's pretty much all I got. Like I said, I really just wanted to touch on the economics issue and make people aware that, yes, we really should be prepared for higher prices at the market in the next couple of years. Yeah. Not just because of the tariffs, but because of what I personally have seen here in Indiana, what I've been noticing through the news and the floods and the farming country being...
Well, the farms around here aren't planted yet, even though we're up to 50%, they said. But,
right, and in our local area, they're not planted yet.
And I don't know what the cutoff date is.
I don't know that they will be, because as we drive through, say, like...
We've had so much rain.
Right, when Ezra and I drive through towards your house, and we drive past some of the houses, those fields are full of flowers.
Yeah.
Like, they're full of wildflowers. Which means it's probably too late to plant those.
I had heard June 25th.
Okay.
It's the cutoff date.
Okay.
And it does look like it's not going to rain all this week. And if it doesn't rain all this week, they could probably plant next week.
But that doesn't mean we're not going to get with...
But that still means probably a low yield.
Right. And that's what I mean. We may get planted, but we're not going to get the crop yields that we would normally get. And it also doesn't mean that we're not going to get hit with more rain that could drown the seedlings that were planted.
Yeah. And and you may say, well, it's just, it's going around, it's everywhere. It's Indiana, it's Illinois, it's the breadbasket. It's all over the place.
Right. Well, and from the video that I was watching last night, apparently China's crop areas are having the same issue.
Yeah. So, you're looking at the two biggest food producers in the world not going to be able to produce as much food. It's going to... the good thing is California produces a lot of food, and it produces a lot of food. but it's on fire.
Right. With the fires that they've been... It's on fire again.
Yeah. But then there's also the Florida and the Panhandle, and they produce a lot of food, but all that takes is a hurricane. So... Right.
Really, honestly, I think people should just be prepared for higher food prices in the coming years.
Yeah. So, anyway, like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz, unless you got something else to add.
Comments, questions, and discussion topics below.
Alrighty. We'll see you all next time.
See you next time.
Please like us. We need this. We need validation.